As an exceedingly obedient human teenager, he mastered the art of acting endearing to keep the monarch in high spirits, even learning to style his hair to enhance the monarch's quality of life. However, a time arrives when he confronts life and death decisions, expressing his desire to bestow supreme power upon the monarch. Although the monarch doesn't anticipate such support from his son, these words resonate deeply within him, warming his heart. Devotedly raising his son, he watches him mature, growing stronger with age. Yet, as he matures, he becomes increasingly rebellious, exerting dominance over the monarch in unexpected and inappropriate ways. Powerless, the monarch confronts him, questioning his influences, and reprimands him for his rebellion. He forcefully pressed him against the door, confessing his love since the teenage years. Having reincarnated as a fox, he gained wisdom from his experiences and vowed not to repeat past mistakes in raising his children. However, unsure of his ability to do so, he pondered for about 3 seconds before questioning what else this rebel wanted from him. Despite his protests, the rebel continued to press him down, ignoring his pleas to stay away. Helplessly, he urged the people around to look at him, desperately seeking assistance. Now, let's delve into the introduction of these two young men. On the maternal side, there's a cherished son named Boyslove, possessing a cold yet captivating beauty. He adorns a flower brooch within a seal, along with fox ears and a tail that can be concealed at will, as he is originally a mature fox. Boyslove has a preference for dishes related to chicken, which ignite a spark in his eyes, contrasting his usual calm and honest demeanor. Notably, he has a low tolerance for alcohol. On the paternal side, there's another beloved son named Hoke Kwan-sun, who was once a pitiful yet fiercely determined young wolf. As a teenager, he exhibited traits of sickness, perversion, and tyranny, resembling a prince. Despite being disliked by the one he loved, Emperor Tumin Kwan, he exerted control over them. His infatuation with the fox, Boyslove, was so intense that he couldn't break free from it. It's worth noting that the fox here refers specifically to his monarch, Boyslove. If you're curious about how the relationship between the cold yet charming nine-tailed fox and the wild and twisted tyrant unfolds, let's wait and see. In a bustling room within the royal citadel, a voice could be heard saying, "Let go, naughty, naughty boy." In the dimly lit scene, two individuals dressed as grooms and a bride were in the midst of an exercise wedding ceremony. The groom tenderly kissed the bride and remarked to her, "Why are you so happy on your wedding day? Have you forgotten that there's nothing between you and him? There's no blood relationship whatsoever. Just drink this mixed wine, and it will be over. Even if you run to the ends of the earth in the future, he will still find you." He added, "You're foolish," before suddenly coughing violently, blood flowing from his mouth onto his hands. To understand what's happening, let's rewind a bit. At that moment, on Lin's sun, he and his fellow beings were discussing his selection to descend to the human world. A small white fox expressed concern, stating that letting him go down there would likely result in him being preyed upon by malicious individuals due to his apparent lack of intelligence. Another larger white fox agreed, emphasizing the weakness of his cultivation level and questioning how he could have been chosen by heaven. Another fox chimed in, mentioning that the identity of the killer star was unclear, only known to be a member of the royal family, and expressing doubt about how the little fox could evade detection. Grateful for their concern, the little fox thanked them and introduced himself as Boyslove, a nine-tailed fox who had practiced for 100 years and had recently been chosen by heaven to descend from the mountain. He explained that every time the evil star appeared, humanity faced great tribulations. Through a merciful agreement with the heavenly path, the fox tribe had the opportunity to become cultivators by finding and transforming the evil star to save sentient beings. It was understood that by embracing this path, they could ascend to become fairies, but failure to do so would result in death. Initially, Boyslove believed that the current Nanhong was the rumored killer star. Regardless of appearances, Nanhong seemed to fit the description provided by heaven, characterized by insolent promiscuity and immorality, causing suffering for the people. According to Mr. Kai's observations, Emperor Kai appeared to be nothing more than an idle fool, while his most trusted national teacher was the one orchestrating behind-the-scenes manipulations and chaos. Feeling incapable of saving Emperor Kai, Bok Lo decided to lend his support to and adopt Prince Hoke Kwan's son, who had lost his father at a young age. Seeing the prince's pitiful state, Bok Lo offered to adopt him, and the prince immediately regarded Bok Lo as his military father. As expected, Prince Hoke Kwan's son exceeded Bok Lo's expectations and emerged as an outstanding individual. He successfully reclaimed lost territory externally and overthrew Emperor Kai's reign internally. Bok Lo's wisdom was evident, proving him to be a wise man deserving of the son he raised. One day, Prince Hoke Kwan's son confessed his feelings to Bok Lo, expressing his affection for him. However, it remained unclear when these feelings had developed, leaving Bok Lo uncertain about how to respond. What remains? Running is the best strategy, but no matter where you run, he will catch you and plead for you not to leave him. As he cannot pray, he becomes completely consumed by darkness, transforming into a tyrant. Returning to the present, upon seeing Bok Lo bleeding like that, he panicked and called for a royal physician. However, Bok Lo stopped him, stating that there was no need, as this was heaven's way of attacking his body. Acknowledging that his body had reached its limit, Bok Lo felt deep regret and blamed himself for not raising his child well. Why did he blame himself in such a manner? He refused to accept it, calling out your name in pain, pleading for you not to leave him alone like that. Upon waking up, he felt confused and disoriented. Was he already dead? He heard a commotion and looked down to see someone causing trouble. The individual shouted loudly, expressing frustration about the deputy not allowing them to take a lunch break and come to see the flowers. Could an unlucky guy like him stay away, fearing he might lose interest in that kid? As he spoke, the boy approached, casually dropping his food with a smirk, jesting that the royal cuisine tasted superior. Puzzled by the expression he should wear in his current life, he clenched his fists angrily, as if contemplating risking it all with the boy. Startled, the child commanded the servants to strike him. Witnessing this, Bok Lo intervened, instructing them to cease. Bok Lo now realized he had been reincarnated. Though uncertain of the reason for his resurrection, if given another chance at life, he vowed not to tread the same path again. Observing the boy's endearing demeanor, vastly different from his past life, he reassured him not to fear, resolving within himself to guide him down a better path this time. Meanwhile, he smiled confidently, a dark aura enveloping him, acknowledging inwardly that the rumors were indeed accurate. He was both astute and compassionate, falling for his ploy. He quickly clarified that he had acted out of kindness, unable to bear seeing him eat such poor fare. However, he found himself taken aback as the boy suddenly retaliated and then accused him. The young man, a member of his household not inclined to dramatic displays, leaped to his defense, embracing him tightly. He explained to Bok Lo that he was often bullied by others, prompting him to fight back this time. Tearfully, he clung to Bok Lo, his stomach growling audibly with hunger. Deep within, he hoped for assistance, seeing in Bok Lo a potential savior from his plight. Holding little Kwan's son close, Bok Lo's heart brimmed with compassion for his poor, honest, and pure son. He vowed to avenge little Kwan's son's suffering, wishing he could send his tormentors to heaven to reunite with their grandparents. However, he knew this wouldn't resolve the situation. Reverting to old ways would only perpetuate the cycle. Suddenly, the boy, now identified as Hoke Kwan's son, warned Bok Lo not to harm him if he wished to avoid pain. Reluctantly, Bok Lo suppressed his desire for his fatherly affection, enduring the anguish as he released the boy. In this lifetime, Bok Lo resolved not to adopt him, determined to chart a different course. After setting him down, he looked up and expressed his hope that he wouldn't witness the seventh prince bullying others again in the future. The boy claimed to understand, but it seemed unlikely he grasped the full extent of the situation. Why was he being called out for bullying when he hadn't done anything wrong? The boy seemed weary of aiding him, despite his good intentions. In a gesture of respect, he vowed not to cause trouble for him in the future. Boyslove silently harbored his deep-seated resentment, multiplying it 1,000-fold. His hatred went unspoken, his suffering unvoiced. While the physical bullying was apparent, the emotional pain remained hidden. He resolved to send a warning to the seventh prince, even invoking the saint's name to emphasize the seriousness of his plea. Did his words have any impact? A servant urged the boy to confront reality. Moments ago, he had hoped for the saint's support, but now it was clear he was alone in his aspirations. He realized he was no different from those who had mistreated him, stooping to pick up fallen rice grains and consume them. As evening fell at the saint's son's palace, he fervently vowed to steer clear of his previous misguided path. His first step was to reject the role of adoptive father, instead accepting the boy as his disciple, vowing only to protect him. But leveraging the saint's status to accept things is akin to designating a disciple as a reserve soldier, a decision with lasting consequences. This matter requires careful and prolonged consideration. Yet, it's impossible to ignore his plight. He's truly in dire straits now. Perhaps it's best to offer clandestine assistance, operating in the shadows. Boyslove prepared food and covertly delivered it to the cold palace for him. Upon entering the room, he found it empty, so he followed his scent to the rear chamber. The gardener, surprised by his presence at such a late hour, questioned his motives. Meanwhile, by the lake, he sat alone when suddenly an arm reached out to him. His eyes brightened as he instinctively pulled the arm's owner into the water, grappling with them. Witnessing this, Boyslove leaped into the water to rescue him. He couldn't comprehend why he was there, what he witnessed, or why he intervened. Why did he allow himself to get so close? It wasn't because he despised malevolent spirits like him, nor did he seek to provoke him. Yet, their proximity was unsettling, prompting him to open up and confess that he no longer wished to feign indifference. He feigned innocence, making a puppy dog face as he tumbled into the water, asking Boyslove what he was talking about, genuinely clueless. Boyslove smiled softly, seemingly understanding everything, recognizing in him the same flaws he had in his appearance, despite his mature demeanor. Recalling their past life, he mentioned how just the thought of that person made him seethe with anger. Suddenly, the slave surfaced, calling for help, startling him. Glancing at Boyslove, he realized the person wasn't dead yet. If they surfaced and began speaking nonsense, everything would unravel. With a gentle smile, Boyslove assured him that he understood his thoughts and urged him not to kill the slave if his attempt failed. Startled to find himself seen, he turned to see Boyslove holding a bamboo tube, pulling the other person up from the water. The slave immediately accused him, loudly expressing a desire for him to be punished. Though he wanted to kill the slave, he had no choice but to deny guilt and bite his tongue, inwardly seething. Turning to Boyslove, he explained that he didn't do it intentionally. The slave had pushed him, and he instinctively grabbed them, causing them both to fall. With everyone in the palace likely to despise the slave, Boyslove, as the Holy Son, would surely support him. Immediately refuting the slave's claim, he stated that he merely intended to remind Kwan's son, but upon touching him, he was dragged into the water, hoping for Kwan's son's protection. Boyslove nodded as if understanding everything, leading the slave to believe that Boyslove would support him. Kwan's son's expression darkened, realizing he wouldn't have peace tonight, and Boyslove might even betray him. It seemed better to take advantage of the situation and eliminate the slave to prevent them from leaving the cold palace. Boyslove comforted Kwan's son, mentioning the effort he put into preparing food for him, consisting only of green vegetables, radishes, and animal feed, a testament to his hardship. Kwan's son was startled, realizing Boyslove was investigating him. Bok Lo urged further investigation into why a mere servant was attending to the prince, suggesting punishment for disrespecting royalty was sufficient cause for the slave's demise. With a swift kick, Bok Lo sent the slave tumbling into the lake, laughing contemptuously. He asserted that even if Kwan's son had initiated the altercation, punishing a disrespectful slave was a prince's prerogative. Afterward, Bok Lo wielded a bamboo stick, repeatedly striking the slave who pleaded for mercy. With a gleaming smile, he turned to Kwan's son, proposing to let him test the slave. Kwan's son accepted the stick and joined Bok Lo in punishing the slave, creating a jovial atmosphere. The slave, unable to endure further, cried out, declaring his allegiance to the concubine, the emperor's favored consort, and accused Bok Lo and Kwan's son of insolence toward her. Bok Lo intervened, signaling Kwan's son to stop the beating. Despite the pain, the slave turned to Bok Lo, questioning if he wished to deal with a troublemaker like him. Bok Lo, embracing Kwan's son gently, assured him that he didn't. Instead, he aimed to impart a lesson and act as his mentor. Internally, Bok Lo resolved to accept Kwan's son as his disciple secretly if not openly. Tenderly touching Kwan's son's cheek, he offered a reassuring smile, asking for his agreement. Kwan's son looked at him with a bewildered expression, seemingly acquiescing silently. Lost in their own world, they disregarded the impending departure of someone seeking help. He pushed Bok Lo's hand away and questioned his intentions. Bok Lo sighed, feeling a mix of indulgence and affection towards Kwan's son's innocence. Removing his facade, he realized Kwan's son truly craved affection but harbored a fear of being hurt. Bok Lo turned around and swiftly pulled up the other slave, reassuring him that he had no ulterior motives. He urged the slave to focus on listening to his teachings first, before throwing him back down with a thud. Addressing Kwan's son, Bok Lo acknowledged that the slave indeed belonged to Lu Fai. However, once Kwan's son ceased to be perceived as a threat or competition, the slave would likely become Lu Fai's illegitimate child. Bok Lo emphasized that Lu Fai, like himself, was not one to idle away time but would rather torment a prince in the cold palace like Hok Kwan's son. Within the royal palace, the hierarchy dictates that the powerful prey on the weak, leaving the vulnerable like Kwan's son to bear the brunt of resentment and abandonment. This slave, fearing retaliation, swiftly shifted blame onto Kwan's son. Upon hearing this, Kwan's son's expression darkened, his grip tightening around the slave's neck. Despite repeated apologies from the slave, Kwan's son remained unmoved until Bok Lo intervened, grasping Kwan's son's hand firmly. Understanding Bok Lo's intention to deter him from seeking revenge, Kwan's son sought guidance. Bok Lo advised him that while the villain deserved punishment, Kwan's son risked implicating himself if he took drastic measures. In dire situations, patience and strategic thinking were paramount. Every available resource, even adversaries, could be leveraged effectively if placed correctly. He didn't fully grasp the concept, so he urged Bok Lo to elaborate. Observing this, Bok Lo gently tousled his hair and clarified that he was exploiting the weaknesses of this individual to enlist their assistance. While this villain may not accomplish great deeds, at least his daily life wouldn't be as agonizing as before. With a tense expression, he glanced at Bok Lo, realizing he had underestimated him. Initially perceiving Bok Lo as an empty-headed ornament, he was surprised to discover Bok Lo's intelligence and cunning nature. Bok Lo turned around, giving him a reassuring pat on the head and once more inquired if he wished to become his disciple. Though he didn't outright accept disciples, he could secretly instruct him. Recoiling as if disturbed, he insisted that Bok Lo refrain from touching him, deeming himself worthless and devoid of utility. Despite not comprehending Bok Lo's intentions, he felt compelled to seek retribution against those who wronged him, expressing disbelief in Bok Lo's intentions and urging him to depart promptly so he could confront the individual in question. Bok Lo, left with no choice, agreed to reconvene later before taking his leave. On the other side, the second slave repeatedly expressed gratitude for sparing the other guy's life and pledged to serve faithfully. He assured that he would heed Bok Lo's guidance as his future master, which ultimately led to the decision to spare the individual. After advising him to be cautious, Boyslove left the scene. Upon returning to his quarters, he discovered the food Boyslove had left behind and couldn't help but wonder why Boyslove treated him so kindly. The following morning, the emperor visited Boyslove and inquired about his earlier willingness to accept his son as a disciple. Capitalizing on the prince's lunch break, the emperor eagerly volunteered to escort Boyslove to observe the situation, his hands frequently brushing against Boyslove's. Upon seeing this, Boyslove playfully punched him a few times before allowing him to proceed with his proposal. Boylove's demeanor turned somewhat grim as he withdrew his hand, inwardly resenting the persistent attention from the emperor. He couldn't fathom why the emperor was fixated on him in this lifetime, finding it distasteful that such intentions were revealed so early. Dissatisfied with the situation, Boyslove preferred not to dwell on it further. In the first performance, as soon as the arrow was released, it struck the bull's eye with precision. The emperor applauded and commended the impressive archery skills of the individual, who happened to be the third prince, fujoshis. Bowing respectfully, he attributed his success to his diligent training and pledged to continue working hard. Upon inquiring about Boylove's opinion of the child, the emperor received a favorable response, with Boyslove remarking that the child showed promise. However, inwardly, Boyslove reflected on the fact that in his previous life, this same child had been a pretentious character, always seeking recognition. Following this, the 12th prince, Hochchap, stepped forward to shoot 3 arrows, earning praise from onlookers. Observing Boylove's reaction, Hochchap sensed a glance and promptly diverted his gaze. Witnessing this, Boyslove couldn't help but find his behavior endearing, causing his mood to lift instantly. On the other side, the 7th prince, having hit the bull's eye with 2 arrows, now appeared triumphant. However, recognizing the potential repercussions if his mother-in-law were to find out, he quickly sought a way to mitigate the situation. Amidst the crowd, he noticed Kwang's son, realizing that without proper guidance, Kwang's son's archery skills would likely be inferior. Turning to Kwang's son, the 7th prince addressed him, remarking on the purpose of the archery session as a test of skill, and expressing frustration at the presence of laziness among the princes. The emperor, overhearing this, demanded to know the identity of the lazy individual. Boyslove inwardly criticized the 7th prince's lack of tact, considering Kwang's son's marginalized status. Nevertheless, the emperor's reprimand prompted everyone's attention to focus on Kwang's son. At this crucial moment, if Kwang's son fails to perform well, he risks losing face in front of everyone. His unfortunate circumstances, compounded by the revelation that he lacks a bow, further emphasize his predicament. Conversely, if he succeeds, it will draw significant attention, potentially endangering his life. In a gesture of unexpected kindness, the 3rd prince approaches and lends Kwang's son his bow and arrow, advising him not to be discouraged by his lack of skill. Kwang's son takes the bow, prompting a sarcastic remark from the 7th prince, who suggests that Kwang's son's recent improvement surpasses even that of the 3rd prince. Despite the sarcasm, Kwang's son takes aim, but his attempts result in 3 missed shots, eliciting laughter from the onlookers. Enraged by Kwang's son's failure, the emperor chastises him, declaring him lacking in talent and dignity. With that, the emperor excuses himself, leaving Boyslove behind. He turned to the 3rd prince and politely offered to return the palace to him. However, the 3rd prince shyly evaded the offer, expressing that he was not the one in need of the palace. Puzzled by why the prince would give it to him instead of reclaiming it for himself, he couldn't help but feel a sense of disappointment, fearing that Boyslove might share the same sentiment. Meanwhile, the 7th princes, filled with self-assured confidence in their martial arts prowess, sought to capture Boylove's attention. Approaching him, they eagerly inquired about what he wished to witness next, or if he desired to observe their martial arts skills. Although Boyslove responded with little words, he agreed to accompany them to the martial arts arena. In the arena, the prince dominated the matches, treating his opponent like a mere punching bag, easily disposed of and cast aside. Witnessing this display of cruelty, Boyslove could no longer tolerate it and halted the match. His demeanor darkened, revealing his discontent with the situation. He wondered why, despite his efforts, he always felt a sense of embarrassment and discomfort whenever Boyslove turned his gaze towards him. The 7th prince's attendant whispered to him about a plan to use a powder on a frightened horse later during a horse demonstration, arranged by Luffy, to gain Boylove's approval. With a grim expression, The seventh prince acknowledged the plan and tightly gripped the item in his hand. Meanwhile, at the small theater of Tamtien, Bok Lo approached the 3 arrows shot by Quan Sun. They appeared to have missed their target, but in reality, all 3 arrows were lodged into the tree. Whose child possessed such hidden talent? It was none other than theirs. At Truong Huang's horse exhibit, a servant brought the horse and advised the seventh prince to first establish a bond with the horse before mounting it. The seventh prince chuckled at the suggestion. Suddenly, the horse whinnied loudly, causing a commotion in the arena. An unidentified individual informed the seventh prince that the moment had arrived. At that instant, the child's hands were coated with incense. However, he found no opportunity to proceed and lamented about the incompetence of the concubine's mother's servant, blaming him for the chaotic behavior of the horses. The third prince attempted to approach and calm the horse, but it kicked him and bolted past 2 leopards before encountering Hat Snow. The third prince discreetly reprimanded him, but no one intervened to stop the horse. The spirited animal galloped towards Bok Lo's position, prompting the third prince to shout a warning, urging Bok Lo to take caution. Meanwhile, Quan Sun leaped in, pushing Bok Lo to safety and instructing him to move aside quickly, asking if he had a death wish. Quan Sun then mounted the horse and rode it for a moment, attempting to calm it down. Bok Lo, however, suggested approaching the horse, soothing it, and gently inquiring about its distress. He proposed listening to its grievances, if any. Quan Sun looked at Bok Lo in astonishment as the horse whispered something to him. As Bok Lo and the others rushed to check on him, Quan Sun relayed that the horse had been fed stimulating food by the palace staff, causing its agitation. Murmurs spread among the onlookers, speculating on who had the leisure to cause such harm. They attributed it to Quan Sun's ill fortune, unfairly blaming him for the mishap. Bok Lo smiled faintly and then fell silent, delegating tasks accordingly. The emperor had always praised the third prince's remarkable abilities, implying that uncovering the truth shouldn't pose much difficulty for him. It was not to be dismissed as a minor test. This astute third prince adeptly maneuvered and involved all the princes, then assured Bok Lo that they would swiftly investigate the incident, whether it was unexpected or intentionally orchestrated to raise alarm among the princes. Grateful for his swift action, Bok Lo acknowledged that he owed the third prince a favor. Observing the composed demeanor of the third prince, it was evident that he had undergone considerable strain. Bok Lo extended his hand, inquiring if the prince had sustained any injuries. With a sigh, the prince allowed Bok Lo to assist him. Thus, the day concluded, with Bok Lo deciding to return with the injured sixth prince for treatment, unaware that his wound had been inflicted by Hok Kiet's assault. The seventh prince cried out, claiming he was injured, but the third prince chastised him, labeling him a fool for allowing Huguanshan to take advantage of him, deeming him as helpless trash. Upon returning to the Holy Sun's palace, he timidly requested Bok Lo to let him down, unaware that Bok Lo hadn't used forbidden magic to detain him. He was free to leave at any time. Bok Lo instructed him to remove his clothes so that he could apply medicine to his wounds. Shyly, he resisted, insisting that it was just a minor injury and he was accustomed to it. Despite his reluctance, Bok Lo gently insisted, explaining that wounds always cause pain and he needed to apply medicine. Eventually, he relented, albeit with complaints, allowing Bok Lo to treat him. In Bok Lo's eyes, he remained the same cute little boy, masking his embarrassment with a stoic expression. As Bok Lo touched the wound, a numbing sensation spread throughout his body, startling him. He worried he had accidentally caused harm. Stammering, he explained that treating the wound on his chest required assistance. After applying the medicine, Bok Lo handed him the bottle and advised him to use it at home. Gratefully, he murmured his thanks and averted his gaze, then promptly excused himself. Bok Lo had intended to invite him to stay for dinner, but he declined and left abruptly, leaving Bok Lo sighing in disappointment. It wasn't as if Bok Lo wanted to keep him for dinner, So why the rush to leave? Later that night, he lay in bed contemplating the bottle of medicine given by Bok Lo, realizing he had rejected Bok Lo's gesture. He felt inadequate, torn between rejecting Bok Lo and accepting the favored prince as his disciple. Tossing and turning, he couldn't shake the feeling that Bok Lo would still care for him. When the servant brought dinner, mistaking his restless movements for tears, he quickly reassured them otherwise. The following day, at Tantu Palace, the eccentric emperor sought out Bok Lo once again, showering him with compliments and flirting shamelessly. He commended Bok Lo for his kindness, even towards someone like himself, stating that no one in the royal palace had a brighter future than the emperor. Bok Lo placed a bottle of medicinal pills before the emperor and suggested that once he mastered the technique, he could craft some energy-boosting pills for his personal use. Excitedly, the emperor remarked on the rarity of the elixir, recognizing it as a secret technique of the demon race. Bok Lo, with a discerning gaze, explained that the elixir was indeed rare and required a substantial amount of spiritual energy to produce. Hence, he only possessed a limited amount at the moment. He expressed his gratitude and promptly sought out someone to test the medicine. Watching him leave, Bok Lo reflected that he was indeed a cunning old fox, caring little for the saint's reputation or the nation's affairs, but solely driven by self-interest. As Bok Lo recounted, while the chi-boosting pill was beneficial, when combined with other ordinary pills and drinks, it could potentially turn toxic. Bok Lo, having perished from pill poisoning in his previous life, recognized the danger posed by such concoctions. It was regrettable that he was dispatched so early by everyone's ignorance. A few days later, he returned to praise Bok Lo's medicinal pill, expressing satisfaction with its efficacy. Bok Lo gladly handed him the next bottle, labeled My Dung Duong Nan, along with a pill intended for one-time use, though it sounded perilous. During court proceedings, he rewarded Bok Lo with a horizontal plate bearing the inscription, Hung Fong Saint's Hand. Bok Lo stood motionless for 5 seconds, bemused by the absurdity of the old fox's actions. He inquired of the court officials if there were any pressing matters requiring his attention, stating that he needed to depart swiftly. However, if anyone had important information to convey, he appeared vexed and mentioned urgent affairs he needed to attend to. One individual silently grumbled about his ambiguous nature, noting that Dai Kai's disappearance seemed imminent. It was reported that Van Chao district had witnessed several peculiar occurrences lately, with over 10 cases of missing children. Tri Chao submitted an investigative report, suggesting the involvement of monsters. This proclamation incited panic, prompting inquiries about the nature of these creatures. Suddenly, a mage's spirit bird appeared and delivered a letter for the old fox to peruse. After reading the missive, he concluded that it was merely an accident. What prompted such malicious rumors? Bok Lo, feeling bored, internally lamented the resurgence of familiar accusations and slanders that had fueled Huaquan Sun's expulsion from the capital. Based on Bok Lo's knowledge of the national teacher, his name is On Nin. In his previous life, On Nin devoted most of his time to practicing in the harsh conditions of the far north. Bok Lo had only encountered him a few times. Historically, upon Hoke Quan Sun's birth, On Nin prophesied that Quan Sun was the harbinger of misfortune and destiny for the Qi dynasty. Whenever On Nin made an appearance, significant events inevitably unfolded. It was believed that due to these prophetic words, Huaguan Shan, upon his birth, faced a fate worse than death, falling into an abyss of despair. The emperor sought to eradicate Quan Sun to avert the predicted disaster, but On Nin intervened, warning that killing Quan Sun prematurely would only unleash calamity upon the realm. The gullible emperor placed great trust in On Nin, allowing him and the enigmatic figure pulling the strings behind the scenes to wield considerable influence over the Qi dynasty's affairs like chess pieces on a board. On Nin has no discernible hobbies, nor does he exhibit an interest in power or wealth. Rather, he derives satisfaction from tormenting Hoke Quan Sun. Bok Lo finds it perplexing to discern On Nin's intentions. In his previous life, Events began with a peculiar incident in the Vanchao districts, catalyzed by a letter from the national teacher. As a result, Ho Kwon Sun's reputation gradually eroded in the eyes of the populace. His actions to shield Kwon Sun incurred the enmity of Ing Nin, who targeted him repeatedly. Ultimately, Ho Kwon Sun was banished from the imperial city, relegated to a desolate expanse. Prior to his departure, Ho Guanshan tearfully embraced Bok Lo, pledging to return for him. However, consumed by murderous impulses and festering resentment, Ho Guanshan metamorphosed into a despot, seeking retribution with blood and iron. His sole gesture of affection was to refer to Bok Lo as his spouse, yet Bok Lo found no solace in such displays of tenderness. The emperor bellowed commands, instructing his officials to heed the directives outlined by the national teacher in the letter, and promptly summon an astronomer to the palace to commence preparations for erecting an altar for celestial worship. One official voiced dissent, arguing that addressing matters concerning the sixth prince should not take precedence at the moment. He insinuated suspicions regarding the national teacher and advocated for his investigation. However, his intentions were misunderstood, as he was merely expressing his concerns independently. Another official chimed in, suggesting that Chu Kan, an elderly mandarin, appeared confused and should be allowed to depart early. Despite Chu Kan's desire to interject, the emperor refused him a chance to speak, promptly dispatching another individual to escort Chu Kan away in order to avoid commotion within the palace. Seeing the unfavorable turn of events, Bok Lo promptly intervened, asserting that it was inappropriate to handle the situation involving the sixth prince in such a manner. Despite the serious expression he wore, Bok Lo endured and continued, emphasizing the effectiveness of the nine-tailed clan's methods in repentance and dispelling evil. He argued that erecting an altar in the capital might not effectively mitigate the disasters potentially caused by the sixth prince, especially in distant regions like Vanchao. Though outwardly maintaining politeness and respect, inwardly, Bok Lo felt like a volcano on the verge of eruption. He grabbed the emperor's shirt and admonished him. As discussions heated up, many voiced agreement with Bok Lo's sentiments. However, it appeared that the emperor remained steadfast in his stance. Bok Lo then proposed that the emperor entrust the sixth prince to him temporarily. He vowed to quell any impending disasters while simultaneously venturing to Vanchao to investigate the root cause of the calamities. Determined not to allow history to repeat itself, Bok Lo was resolute in preventing premature exposure of the magician's secrets. Recognizing the opportunity to gain favor, the third prince promptly volunteered to accompany Bok Lo. Delighted by the offer, Bok Lo gladly accepted, believing that with their combined efforts, they could effectively address the issues in Vanchao. As they departed from Tantu Palace, two soldiers escorted the sixth prince, one of whom was Kwang Gon, dispatched by the national teacher to assist Bok Lo. Expressing gratitude to the national teacher for the support, Bok Lo was surprised by the swiftness with which the teacher provided aid. Kwang Gon then informed Bok Lo that the whip he received was a gift from the national teacher, Kim Tien Tin Hoi, equipped with an ear crystal for convenient communication. Thanking the teacher, Bok Lo acknowledged the quality of the whip. However, a look of doubt crossed Kwang Gon's face, questioning whether Bok Lo truly believed their words. Suddenly, Bok Lo instructed him to kneel down, then wielded the whip with such force that it seemed to strike true. The whip cracked against the floor, filling the air with a sharp sound, as he gazed at Bok Lo with a visage etched with fear. Upon being addressed as Saint by Bok Lo, he felt a surge of terror coursing through him as Bok Lo wielded the whip, striking him across the face and commanding him to kneel. Panic now consumed him, his heart reeling from what felt like a devastating blow. In his turmoil, he contemplated deception, realizing with dismay that his trust in Bok Lo had been misplaced, leading to a sense of betrayal. Anger flared within him as he vehemently protested to Bok Lo, declaring himself a prince who would not kneel, unable to bear the humiliation. Bok Lo raised his hand, invoking magic, and informed him that the only prince present was marked by the emperor's Tai star. Bound by chains conjured from Bok Lo's magic, He was forcefully propelled against the wall. As Bok Lo approached, seizing his face firmly, he realized that Bok Lo had overlooked his plight before, but now understood that it stemmed from Bok Lo's deep concerns. This time, when they arrived in Van Chao, Bok Lo resorted to violence when faced with non-cooperation. He lashed out with the whip, striking him repeatedly until the detective dispatched by the national lawyer harbored no further doubts and urged him to depart. Assuring Bok Lo that he would be available for any needed assistance, he left promptly. Once alone, Bok Lo's cold facade melted, revealing a worried expression as he proceeded to untie him. Observing the aftermath of his outburst, Bok Lo felt a pang of concern, explaining that he had directed his aggression towards the national teacher's spy, sparing him from harm. Han, however, recoiled from Bok Lo's proximity, warning him not to approach. Despite Bok Lo's anxious calls, Han remained aloof, withdrawing a short knife and questioning Bok Lo's motives. Frustrated, Bok Lo sighed, realizing that his attempts to establish trust had fallen short, leaving him feeling uneasy. Approaching him, Bok Lo enveloped him in a tight embrace, causing him to panic and instinctively clutch at Bok Lo's robe. He questioned why Bok Lo didn't evade his strike. Yet, as Bok Lo drew nearer, embracing him firmly, he attempted to resist, urging Bok Lo to release him, though his efforts were futile against Bok Lo's grip. Bok Lo reassured him, softly affirming that the influence of the powerful national teacher held no sway over him now. He had brought him to Van Chao not to inflict suffering but to clear his name, offering him solace instead. Bok Lo expressed that Quan Sun was not a mere pawn or an ill-fated star but rather his disciple and son, a sentiment cherished deeply by Bok Lo. Pushing Bok Lo away slightly, he retrieved medicine for the wound on his hand, intending to tend to Bok Lo's injuries. Despite Bok Lo's insistence that the injury was minor, born from his own hand, he insisted on applying the medicine, demonstrating his care and devotion. As he gently tended to Bok Lo's wound, they discussed the challenges ahead in Van Chao, strategizing together to confront them. Externally, Bok Lo jovially remarked and chuckled, expressing a preference for using spells to mitigate misfortune, expressing concern about potential adverse effects. He suggested that it would be beneficial for him to accompany Bok Lo, but inwardly, he seethed with anger towards Kwang Gon for daring to chain his beloved son. Kwang Gon also concurred with Bok Lo's decision to allow him to remain by Bok Lo's side. With time running short, he urged them to depart swiftly, bearing the weightiest burden in the tale. Doubting the truth of the situation, he subtly manipulated the curtains to reveal Bok Lo seated in a chair with his legs casually resting on Quan Sun's lap, a gesture that appeared to humiliate him. Perceiving Bok Lo as solely motivated by personal gain, he concluded that Bok Lo lacked integrity and promptly departed. Turning to him, Bok Lo complimented Quan Sun's acting skills, acknowledging that his portrayal of humiliation was quite convincing. Quan Sun, however, felt more embarrassed than humiliated by Bok Lo's praise. Bok Lo playfully offered him flowers and fruits, but when Quan Sun pulled them away in frustration, he angrily accused Bok Lo of teasing him. Though Bok Lo wasn't entirely certain, he found the child's reaction adorable and couldn't resist. Opening his mouth wide, Bok Lo gently nibbled Quan Sun in jest. The child laughed joyfully, warming Bok Lo's heart, as the tension of the past few days finally seemed to dissipate with the boy's smile. Bok Lo sighed, expressing regret that Quan Sun had to endure the discomfort of the chains and perform under duress, but noted the improvement in his demeanor. Sitting up earnestly, Quan Sun thanked Bok Lo sincerely. Bok Lo pretended not to hear the last 3 words clearly and asked him to repeat them. Annoyed, the boy replied that he didn't hear clearly. Deciding to move on from teasing, Bok Lo got to the main topic. He approached and inquired about what Bok Lo was reading. Bok Lo explained that it was a report on the case of a missing child in Van Chao. Startled, the boy looked up and expressed surprise that Bok Lo wielded influence in Van Chao. Bok Lo pointed out that this wasn't exactly a form of power, but cautioned against underestimating his capabilities. He then asked if the boy wanted to see the evidence of the accusations thrown at Tu Quan's son. Obediently, the boy sat down like a puppy and expressed his interest in seeing it. Van Chao is currently divided into 5 districts, among which 3 districts have reported cases of missing children. Van Kai has recorded 2 cases, Van Vu has reported 1 case, while Van Ki has the highest number of cases, with more than 10 missing children. The children who have gone missing come from various backgrounds, including farmers, merchants, and even affluent families. Initially, the authorities treated the early cases lightly, considering them as routine kidnappings. However, the situation escalated when the daughter of a wealthy businessman disappeared. This prompted the judge of Van Ki district to take immediate action. Upon learning of the situation, Chi Chao reprimanded the judge of Van Ki for failing to report such a significant incident promptly, which only served to infuriate the populace. Chi Chao's inability to protect the judge was evident in the face of such public outcry. After conducting investigations, they uncovered numerous instances of missing children across various locations in Van Chao, making it impossible to conceal the gravity of the situation. Reports were escalated to Chi Chao. The judge of Van Ki district admitted his fault, acknowledging that dealing with such psychotic monsters was beyond his capabilities. Since the initial disappearance case in Van Ki, he had implemented strict measures. Although sporadic cases of missing children continued to surface in other areas, he was convinced these were the works of demons, absolving himself of responsibility. He attributed his inaction to being targeted by the national lawyer. Bok Lo recognized that this matter was not within his jurisdiction. Moreover, peculiarities and suspicions surrounded the case. Children were disappearing during daylight hours, contrary to typical behavior exhibited by evil creatures, who usually operated in deserted places or under cover of night. Additionally, despite imposing restrictions on entry and exit from Van Ki district, some missing children remained unaccounted for. Observing this anomaly, he speculated whether the children might still be within the district's confines. Bok Lo pondered the possible motives behind the abduction of the children. As the carriage halted, a renowned soldier briefed Bok Lo on the situation, informing him that they had stopped to deploy troops, suggesting Bok Lo take a brief respite outdoors. Seizing the opportunity, the 3rd prince ventured out to procure more food. Observing this, Quan's son, while hunting, perceived Hoke Fu Kwang's penchant for scheming and employing insincere tactics to curry favor with others. Upon the 3rd prince's return with a chicken, he proudly presented it to Bok Lo, aware of Bok Lo's fondness for poultry. Bok Lo commended the gesture, questioning the need for the prince to exert himself in hunting. Nevertheless, the prince insisted on demonstrating his commitment by personally procuring food for Bok Lo. Meanwhile, another individual encountered trouble. The notion of hunting a mere wild chicken seemed exaggerated, prompting thoughts that if he were not restrained, he could still hunt for Bok Lo. The 3rd prince approached him, offering food and snacks for the journey ahead. A nearby servant muttered in a hushed tone about the 3rd prince's excessive kindness and warmth, even towards someone of lower status. He couldn't help but look down on the 3rd prince, despite initially believing in Hoke Fu Kwang's sincerity. When the 7th prince began to bully him, the 3rd prince intervened to stop the altercation. However, the 7th prince persisted in his aggression, dismissing any notion of brotherhood with someone he considered a scoundrel before storming off in anger. Despite this mistreatment, the 3rd prince offered words of comfort and encouraged him to return. Gratefully, he complied, expressing thanks to the 3rd prince for his support. As he journeyed back, he realized that the jade his mother had given him was missing. It must have fallen somewhere along the way. Upon his return, he noticed the 3rd prince with a displeased expression. He couldn't help but feel resentful, thinking that if he weren't still of use to the 3rd prince, he wouldn't even bother interacting with someone of his status. As he searched for the lost jade, he felt overwhelmed with emotion, doubting the authenticity of his identity as a star. Frustrated, he discarded the food he had been carrying, feeling betrayed by his own circumstances. Seeing this, Bok Lo picked up the food and hurled it towards the 3rd prince, surprising him with the sudden action. The 3rd prince, confused, questioned Bok Lo about his intentions. Bok Lo hinted that there was no need to go anywhere as they were almost at their destination. However, inwardly, he questioned why he would mention it when they were almost there. The third prince, sensing Bok Lo's awareness of his pretense, explained that it was due to his sensitive position, fearing that revealing the gift in front of strangers might cause harm. Thus, he had been waiting for the right moment to present it. Drawing closer, the third prince embraced him, acknowledging his own fault in failing to balance between public and private matters. He adopted a pitiful demeanor and assured Bok Lo that it was all right. Recognizing the perception of him as the harbinger of disaster in Yunqiao, the third prince felt compelled to maintain his stance to avoid appearing weak. Thus, he opted to generously apologize as a prudent course of action. The third prince bowed in apology, expressing shame for the oversight in not attending to Bok Lo and Quan Sun properly, and promptly left the palace, lamenting the missed opportunity to fulfill his duties. However, amidst the tranquility, chaos erupted as a new threat emerged. Newborn creatures, threatening to wreak havoc. Vong Tru prepared to intervene, triggering a conflict fueled by resentment and warfare. Bok Lo, utilizing his spiritual powers, advised caution and urged hiding. Despite Bok Lo's warnings, the third prince disregarded them and joined the fray. When asked for guidance by another soldier on how to handle the elusive monsters, Bok Lo explained their vulnerability to fire due to their low-level impurity. Disregarding Bok Lo's counsel, the third prince charged forward, dispatching the creatures. Their putrid remains splattered onto Bok Lo, emitting a foul odor that repelled nearby soldiers. Bok Lo, perturbed, turned towards the third prince with a mix of affection and annoyance. Meanwhile, the third prince smiled contentedly. Bok Lo, annoyed, instructed him to go and tidy up. While the soldiers attended to their duties, Bok Lo and the third prince made their way to the lake. Feeling embarrassed, he queried Bok Lo about the decision to bathe together, wondering if it was a form of punishment. Secretly, he pondered whether his slight smile had provoked Bok Lo's ire. Bok Lo explained that he didn't want to leave him alone in the group for safety reasons and jokingly asked if he wanted to join. Bashfully, he declined, covering his face in shyness. Bok Lo teased him, affectionately calling him Little Quan Sun. Despite his reluctance, he remained concerned for Bok Lo's safety, particularly in a lake like this where swimming might not be entirely safe. He surreptitiously observed Bok Lo, convinced that the guard was more for Bok Lo's protection than his own. Suddenly, he noticed something resembling a dragon emblem on Bok Lo's back. Startled, he questioned Bok Lo about the appearance of the symbol associated with the Son of Heaven. Bok Lo, bewildered, turned around to inspect his own back.